So, Perry, I was wrong about something, and it makes me sound and seem like a butthole, and I have to apologize directly to Tom Paton, who made that film we talked about last week, Where the Robots Grow. Because I think I said a lot of things that weren't true. So here's what happened. I found out about that movie. You shared the story, and I then proceeded to spend the next 43 minutes watching 43 minutes of it. And then I tried to dig up everything I could quickly before we recorded about like how it got made or whatever. And I wasn't able to turn up anything deep about like from the director, aside from the write-ups and things I mentioned, which were all focused on like the economic impact and that sort of thing, and trying to use AI to create a new economic model. And I made comments like, I want to see a team of artists doing this because they want to tell a story, not because they want to make a bunch of money with AI. And then after that, I found this great YouTube channel by YouTuber Hayden Rushworth, who is a filmmaker, interviews other filmmakers. And he did an interview series with Tom Paton. And I had it on in the background while I was working and I was listening to it. And I found myself nodding along to the things he was saying. And I realized I got this guy completely wrong. So what actually happened and why I'm a jerk is because Tom just made a movie that I don't think is very good. In all of the interviews talking about it, he focuses on how these kinds of workflows and using these tools can make it so that his crew at the end of the day can have more time to go home to their families and they can do more ambitious stuff with a smaller team. All of his focus in talking in these interviews was not about making money or using AI to make a cheap buck. It was about using AI to make a small team able to do things that are bigger. Like everything he was saying lines up with the kinds of things that I espouse when it comes to creativity and AI. And the movie was just not very good. And so the movie was, in my opinion, so very not good that it seemed that much like a cash grab. And then those articles written about it, because obviously he just understands how to talk out of both sides of his mouth. Like he's got his artistic things he's doing, but he knows how to talk to the investor crowd and these people that need money. And
yeah, like you'd have to.
Yeah, and that was the only avenue I had found to explore. So that was how I came away with that impression. But I was so wrong. The movie just suffers from being a movie I didn't like very much. It wasn't made out of any malicious intent, and in fact, the intent behind it seemed good. And I felt like it was worth mentioning that because I wouldn't feel right having learned that and not sharing it.
Yeah. So, do you think that the lackluster response to the movie, the way that you perceived it, was that based on limitations within the tools, or was it based on limitations of the story?
I think it was both, and I think it's because it was framed as the first AI animated movie. Like we talked about,
so there's hype behind it. So immediately you can not meet expectations.
Yeah, and I think you said when you lead with the tech, it's going to seem like a tech demo, and that's what happened. Right. You know, like they led with, this is our AI made this. Which also wasn't super true. Like I talked about, they used assets from an asset store and like a lot of stuff was hand done. They just used a lot of AI workflow tools in the pipeline. So this was actually an example of a small team of artists making a big, long film. It just, I didn't think the writing was good. And I think ultimately that's what made it fall apart. And like it just, you know, but that makes me a jerk. That doesn't make it objectively bad because I think the film is bad. I just didn't like it.
Yeah. So one other question before we move on, because I know we're already running low on this segment.
Oh yeah, we'll be good.
With that, if you had no idea that AI was being used, like if that was not part of the lead in, and you just turned it on, it was like early morning on a Saturday morning, and it was on PBS. What would you have thought? Oh,
I mean the same thing. Like it wasn't a very good movie. I would just say it's a pretty mid movie.
You just would have changed the channel. You wouldn't have made necessarily a value judgment on the people that were making it.
Yeah, well, and honestly, the other thing is too, like, this one doesn't seem like a cash grab outside of the context because it just seems like a kind of bad animated movie. There are a lot of look at the Hallmark Empire, which has become its own thing that people love for their own thing, but like a lot of movies, like a content mill of movies. Yeah. So like that exists as a problem outside of AI. But yeah, if I had no idea and I casually encountered it, I would just be like, oh, this is not super good and it's really long. Nice. But that doesn't make it a bad movie. That just means I didn't like it. And so Tom, if you happen to stumble on this, I'm sorry for the things I said in the other one that were incorrect, and I'm sorry that I don't like your movie, but I appreciate your approach now that I've actually listened to you speak. And we should link that video. It's a great interview. And that Hayden Rushworth's channel is also really cool, too.
Very cool.
So that out of the way, almost perfectly splitting the uprights with 5 minutes left in this segment, I want to talk about the challenges of using a computer to use a computer in a world built for humans. I was going to try and thematically tie it to the human baby that they find in that film, but I don't have a good segue in the pipes. So AI agents are a big thing where you can give an AI a task and it goes out and does it for you. And that task involves things like going to websites, logging into things, and using a computer. And something I don't think that we think about often is the act of using a computer that's designed for a human. Like when you go to a website, you're clicking on buttons that like say log in or post or whatever, but those buttons are pictures that are labeled like post, and you infer so much from what you visually understand. But when a computer sees a website, it sees the code, right? Like if you've ever hit F12 on a web page and accidentally pop open the inspector and you see all that code, that's the way the computer views a web page. So how do you get it to understand like, oh, you click this login button and go to this thing? It has to like comb through and scrape through and hope that things are labeled properly, which is always a bit of a crapshoot. And now AI tools are coming out that are getting better and better at UI automation. Specifically, the one I was looking at most recently was OmniParser V2, which Microsoft is behind. And it is a graphic user interface automation tool. And before I continue, Perry, you've messed around a little bit with some like...
Yeah, I've messed around with OpenAI's operator, and then about a year or so ago, I played with a tool called Multion, and that's like a browser extension that can automate some things, and that was fun. That's the one that there's a tech demo of that where they were showing it to a reporter, and it passed the California driver's license exam. So it's kind of a hackerish demo of it.
That's excellent. And it's cool when you engage one of these things because it uses the computer the way you do. It's moving the mouse. It's clicking on things. But that relies on the code underlying it being written in a way it can interpret. For people familiar with web dev, there was the push to, and I might be getting this wrong because I only have my pinky toe in it, but the push to the semantic web where instead of everything being divs, you start labeling sections as like heading, byline, content, so that things like screen readers and accessibility tools for people who are visually impaired or hard of hearing, those tools can interpret things better because the code is laid out better. And that is actually the same thing that powers a lot of these automation tools is the accessibility features. Yeah. So that's a fun little parallel, little intersection that I don't think a lot of people think about. And now, rather than digging through the code side, these AI tools and some other ones that use different machine learning techniques that aren't like LLMs actually take the visual screenshot, identify pieces within it, and then create like, okay, this region is this, and this region is this. And based on other things I know, I can infer all of these other things. So we're getting closer and closer to it using the computer the way a person does. Like eyes first, thinking about it, and then taking an action. But it's still shockingly bad at it. The state-of-the-art average accuracy of OmniParser, the tool that does that, is 39.6% accurate at just doing stuff on a computer. And it's something that I feel like is unintuitive to people who aren't as plugged in, that it would be this difficult.
Yeah, and it's, I think a year from now, it'll be a lot better when we look at how fast these kinds of things have been improving. But this technology is actually nothing really new. I guess that the slathering of AI over the top of it is the new thing so that there can be some simulated cognition behind it. Mm-hmm. But long times ago, like the old IVR systems, the interactive voice response systems where you'd call up AT&T and ask for an operator, all of that was built on screen scraping technologies where they're navigating through a computer interface.
Really?
And yeah, and it just kind of mapped where things would go, and it'd say like, put this cursor here and select radio button number 3 and click this button. And the thing that would go wrong with that is if the mapping for the screen ever changed, like you make a change to the visual screen that an operator would use, well, then you've got to go back and change your IVR system. Otherwise, bad things happen. Same thing with automated testing tools for UX. All of that was based on positional understanding or even some screenshots, but that has been around for a long time too. So using things like operator and being able to do screen automation is an evolution. And I think we should be farther along than we are right now. But maybe some of the reasoning models and advances in computer vision are going to come together in a meaningful way to help that.
I think they will. And the thing that I think that's interesting about this too is like you mentioned, like it's an XY coordinate, like where to put the mouse, where to click it. That is in essence a workaround so that a computer can use a computer system designed for a human. And so the more better, the more these tools improve, the more we are kind of building this weird bloaty workaround to using a computer. Because like the most efficient thing would be for there to be an underlying API, like there are with some things, to interact with something via code. But I think what you pointed out earlier when we were talking and prepping the show was like, this is part of the push to building robots that can do things. The world is built for like people and humans, and we're building computers that can interact with it for humans. But in this case, when we're talking about the digital world, it's a weird, like circular workaround that I think is interesting.
It is. Yeah. Computers using computers like humans to interact with computer things. It also makes things a lot slower than they would have to be otherwise. But it's interesting because nobody in the next year or two is going to API-ify everything. And so there are some things that you can only do through the interface.
Yes.
In the same way, like what you were saying with humanoid robots, the world basically has been built for bipedal, 4.5 and above people with 2 hands.
Yeah.
To do things.
And just to put a button on it, when you talk about making various systems interact with each other and connect systems to systems, the lowest common denominator and the thing that everything is designed for, at least for us, is a human being. So everything has a human operable interface. And if we can make something that can operate human operable things, you can connect anything. And I think that's kind of a weird fundamental truth, as kludgy as it would be. It's weird philosophically to me to chew on.
Right.
And
it is.
Speaking of things that are philosophically weird to chew on, you've got a segment about making better viruses next, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because what's more fun than making better viruses?
This is the FAIK Files.